As promised in the last video, we're going to do a deep dive in these crypto bills that went through the Crypto Week vote-a-rama in Congress last week. First, there's the Genius Act, Stablecoins bill, and then there's the Anti-CBDC Act, which will ban a federal digital dollar. We're going to start by unpacking why the Genius Act stablecoins are much more similar to the CBDCs than the talking points might have you think, and then what actually makes them different. If you read the talking points from Trump and the GOP, the concern is basically that a Federal Reserve-issued CBDC, central bank digital currency, is the equivalent of the China surveillance state. Trump signaled in his crypto executive order that he wanted to ban the idea. We need to take measures to protect Americans from the risks of central bank digital currencies, which threaten the stability of the financial system, individual privacy, and the sovereignty of the United States. Another way of saying that is the Federal Reserve, the only one who could issue a CBDC, is a threat to the U.S. financial system. If that sounds a little absurd, it's because it is. Remember where this mistrust comes from. After the January 6th insurrection, Trump and the Trump family were not just getting deplatformed from social media, they were also getting debanked. That is a grudge that Trump and the GOP have not forgotten. Congressman Emmer, who sponsored the anti-CBDC legislation, said that CBDCs could give the federal government the ability to surveil and restrict Americans' transactions and monitor every aspect of our daily lives. The key word there is could. Let's be very clear here. Surveillance mechanisms are not built into blockchain technology. They must be put in there by design. The White House issued its own statement. The United States will never allow the creation of a CBDC that could be used to surveil, control, or deplatform American citizens. We see this theme of surveillance state and deplatforming when it comes to CBDCs from both the GOP and Trump. So if the United States is not going to issue a digital dollar to compete with the Chinese RMB or the digital euro, then what is the United States going to do? That's where the Genius Act comes in. The Genius Act, which is now law, allows private companies to issue stablecoins. And through the requirements of the Genius Act, our corporation-controlled digital dollars could have always had an alternative of decentralized stablecoins based purely on the code and not controlled by any corporations, a more layman's version, a Wikipedia-modeled stablecoin. A large community governs and maintains the infrastructure. So let's break down why a US CBDC and a Genius Act stablecoin is not actually all that different. First, they're both permissioned systems, in contrast to a permissionless system, which is what you often hear about when it comes to blockchain and crypto. The crypto native community generally wants permissionless systems because they are more secure. If just one company can control the entire ledger or the entire protocol, then one mistake by that company can ruin the entire project. In a permissionless structure, the entire community would have to screw up all at the same time. So a US CBDC would obviously be permissioned because it'd be run by the Federal Reserve, and it can't give the public keys to that system for all sorts of national security concerns. Genius Act stablecoins are also permissioned because they require a whole licensing and registration regime that only a company would be able to do. Code itself could not go through the registration and licensing application process. With surveillance, they both run the same risk. They're going to be tracking metadata. They're going to both have the ability to block transactions because the Genius Act stablecoins need to comply with Bank Secrecy Act and Know Your Customer requirements. The companies that issue these private stablecoins must monitor your transactions, must collect your personal data, and actively report suspicious transactions to the government. And there's the deplatforming risk that they both share. If there were a US CBDC, the federal government would want to have a way of freezing or denying access to rogue states, sanctioned entities, bad actors generally, from using the US financial infrastructure. Genius Act stablecoin issuers will deny transactions. They will deny access to people. But the difference will be who gets to make the decision on who doesn't get access. With a US CBDC, it'd be the federal government. With Genius Act stablecoins, it's private companies. With a dollar peg, they're similar-ish. Obviously, with the US CBDC, there's no peg because it is the dollar. With Genius Act stablecoins, they're required to have reserves. But I put a little asterisk here because the peg is maintained as long as the company is solvent or the assets aren't at risk. An example of depegging was the Terra Luna collapse, which is a project that would not have survived these reserve requirements, but also USDC issued by Circle when Silicon Valley Bank went under. It eventually recaptured its peg, but there was still some time when that was in doubt. With settlement speeds, they are similar-ish. With a US CBDC, you would obviously be able to settle instantly, meaning that as soon as user 1 sends to user 2, that's done. Everyone has US dollars. With stablecoins, you still have instant speed of the stablecoin going from user 1 to user 2. But if user 2 wants actual US dollars, there's going to be a delay and probably some fees to exchange that stablecoin to actual US dollars. Here's where the two really diverge. There's the redemption guarantees. A US CBDC backed fully by the government because it's issued by the government. Stablecoins are only as good as their issuer. And history has shown that stablecoin issuers are not perfect. Then there's insurance. CBDCs don't need FDIC coverage because they are the public's money. Genius Act stablecoins aren't required to have insurance and they aren't FDIC insured. As long as the reserves are good, no one should have a redemption problem. The as long as part is a little scary. Now, fees are a big problem in our digital economy. We know that credit card companies are taking 2 to 3% of every transaction. So if you're a small business owner and someone pays their restaurant bill with a credit card, you only get $97 of that. And if you use a credit card to pay the vendor who does their janitorial services, they're only going to get $94. And that continues to diminish until that initial $100 goes down to zero. But in an all cash economy, the $100 will always stay $100, no matter how many times you pass it along. US CBDCs could eliminate those fees. Stablecoins could also eliminate those fees as long as you stay within the crypto economy. But if you want to get out of the crypto economy and go back into US dollars, you're going to still have redemption fees, which is equivalent to the 2 to 3% that credit card companies charge. Genius Act stablecoins are not really the crypto native type of stablecoin you might imagine that's governed by technology. Instead, the Genius Act elevates the roles of companies. All the risks with a CBDC are actually true of the Genius Act stablecoin. They're just as surveillable, they're just as permissioned, and they're arguably less protected. But we shouldn't be too surprised because technology can't donate to campaign funds. The government can't donate to campaign funds. But you know who can? Companies can. And those companies donated to a $260 million super PAC in the last election cycle and donated millions to Trump's inauguration fund. I hope you found this useful. Drop me any questions you have, and we'll do a deep dive into the Clarity Act, which is the other crypto bill, the next time.